The wind howled like a symphony of death, carrying icy blades that slashed through the desolate streets of New York. That night, beneath the flickering streetlights that seemed ready to give up entirely, a shocking sight emerged. Sarah, a homeless girl with sunken eyes full of despair, curled up in the shadowy corner of an old brick building. Her tattered coat clung to her frail body like a cruel joke of fate. It was useless against the bone-chilling cold threatening to consume her with every passing second. Snow fell thickly, settling onto her tangled hair, making her look like a forgotten ghost in the heart of the glittering city. In her hands, the only thing standing between her and the merciless cold was an old, threadbare blanket, so worn it was barely more than a memory of warmth. She clutched it tightly, her fingers trembling from the biting frost, teeth chattering in a rhythm that echoed the dwindling strength of her life. Hunger, an untamed beast, growled in her stomach, tearing at what little energy she had left. Around her, people rushed past in heavy coats and warm scarves, not sparing a glance at the small, shivering figure in the darkness. To them she didn't exist. To the world, she was nothing more than a speck of dust carried away by the wind. Then, breaking through the eerie silence of the night, a sound shattered the void, a weak, pitiful whimper, a cry for help from the edge of death. Sarah lifted her head, her breath forming a ghostly mist in the frozen air. Under the dim glow of the dying street lamp, she saw it, a large German shepherd, its fur matted with dirt and snow, curled up beside a reeking dumpster. Its body trembled violently, its ribs jutting out beneath its thick coat as if ready to pierce through its skin. The dog lifted its weary eyes, deep brown pools of exhaustion and pain, before collapsing onto the icy concrete, defeated. Sarah froze. A war erupted inside her mind. The blanket, the only thing keeping her alive, was now a choice between her survival and the life of the suffering creature before her. She knew the cold could kill her within hours if she let go of it. But as she stared at the dog, at the way it lay there, abandoned and shaking just like her, something inside her broke. She couldn't bear to watch another life flicker out in silent despair. With trembling hands, Sarah bit down on her lip hard enough to draw blood, then slowly peeled the blanket away from herself. The cold crashed into her like a pack of starving wolves, gnawing at her skin without mercy. She gasped, her breath stuttering, but still she crawled toward the dog. "Hey, little one," she whispered, her voice hoarse from cold and fear. The dog didn't react, only shivering harder. Carefully, she draped the blanket over its frail body, each movement slow, deliberate, as if she was handing over her very existence. When the last corner of the blanket covered the dog, it let out a faint whine, eyes flickering open with something between shock and gratitude. Sarah sat there, no longer shielded, her body exposed to the merciless winter. The cold now felt like a blade slicing through her chest. But then, something miraculous happened. Despite its weakness, the dog inched closer to her, pressing its warm body against hers. A tiny spark of heat spread through her frozen skin, fragile yet defiant. She choked back a sob, tears spilling down her ice-kissed cheeks. "You're not alone," she murmured, gently stroking the damp fur. The dog let out a long breath as if in agreement. On what seemed to be the final night of their lives, they found each other, a homeless girl and an abandoned dog. Sarah named him Shadow, never realizing that this single act of kindness at the brink of life and death would open a door she had never dared to dream of. Dawn broke, but the weak sunlight could not pierce through the thick, gray clouds hanging over New York. Snow continued to fall, blanketing the filthy streets, and the cold remained a relentless predator, refusing to spare anyone. Sarah woke up under the rickety awning of an abandoned store, her body stiff from the freezing temperature, every joint in her body aching as if they were about to shatter. But beside her, Shadow still lay there, his head resting on her bony legs, his steady breath forming small white clouds in the icy air. The tattered blanket now covered them both, pitifully thin, but it was the warmth of Shadow's body that had kept her alive through the brutal night. Sarah looked down at the dog, his deep brown eyes now carrying a hint of newfound life. A rare smile flickered on her cracked lips. "Good morning, warrior," she whispered, running a gentle hand through Shadow's matted fur. He wagged his tail slightly, a small motion but one that sent warmth through her frozen heart. "Looks like we're a team now, huh?" Shadow lifted his head as if nodding in agreement, and for the first time in years of surviving in the shadows, Sarah felt a fragile sliver of hope bloom within her. But that hope was quickly crushed by the vicious growl of her stomach. Hunger, the enemy that never forgave, had returned. They left their temporary shelter, stepping into the chaotic flow of the city. Sarah led Shadow through the crowded streets, her eyes scanning frantically like a hunter searching for prey. Any scrap of food, a piece of bread dropped by accident, an abandoned apple on a park bench. But New York was not a place of mercy. People brushed past her and Shadow, their eyes cold or indifferent, as if the two of them were nothing more than invisible ghosts. A man in a sleek business suit nearly stepped on Shadow's paw, only managing a muttered "move," before disappearing into the crowd. Sarah clenched her jaw, gripping the worn strap of her ragged bag, the only thing she had before she met Shadow. By noon, hunger had become an unbearable nightmare. Sarah stopped near the entrance of a subway station, where streams of people rushed past, the jingle of coins in their pockets like a cruel melody. She collapsed onto the frozen pavement, pulling her knees to her chest, her breath shaky. Shadow sat beside her, ears perked, his sharp eyes scanning their surroundings. "We need food, Shadow," she murmured, staring into his loyal eyes. But how? Nothing came for free on these streets. Then an idea struck her. Before life had turned her into a survivor on the brink of existence, Sarah had loved music. She once dreamed of grand stages, where her voice would rise and touch the hearts of others. Now her stage was a filthy sidewalk, her audience nothing but indifferent passers-by. But she had nothing left to lose. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and began to sing. At first, her voice trembled, fragile like a whisper, but then it grew steady and strong, a haunting melody that carried the sorrow of her soul. "Hear me just once in this endless night," the lyrics drifted into the frigid wind, weaving into the hurried steps of strangers. At first no one noticed. They walked past her as if she were just another stain on the pavement. But then Shadow did something unexpected. As a middle-aged man in a business suit strode by, Shadow stood up, wagging his tail and giving a soft bark, not aggressive but friendly, almost inviting. The man stopped, looking down at Shadow, then at Sarah. With a careless shrug, he reached into his pocket and tossed a few coins onto the ground before walking away. Sarah stopped singing, staring at the money in shock, her heart pounding. "Thank you," she whispered, but he was already gone. Shadow didn't stop. He kept drawing attention, wagging his tail at a young woman, tilting his head at an old lady. A woman in a thick fur coat paused, kneeling to stroke Shadow's head. "Such a beautiful dog," she murmured, then glanced at Sarah. Without another word, she pulled a $5 bill from her wallet and placed it into Sarah's trembling hands. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "Thank you," she choked out. The woman nodded before walking away. Shadow turned back, nudging Sarah's hand as if urging her to keep going. And she did. She sang, her voice growing bolder, more captivating. By sunset, Sarah had earned more money than she had dared to dream of, enough for a warm meal for both of them. They left the subway station, heading toward a small convenience store where Sarah bought a sandwich and some dog food for Shadow. But joy was fleeting. As they turned into a dark alley, a shortcut to the abandoned lot where they usually slept, an uneasy feeling twisted in Sarah's gut. Footsteps echoed behind her, slow, deliberate, menacing. "The hell are you looking at?" A raspy voice cut through the cold air. Sarah spun around, heart hammering. 3 men stepped out of the shadows, their clothes tattered, eyes burning with a mix of desperation and cruelty. The tallest one, his hoodie pulled low over his face, smirked. "Looks like you made some good money today, huh, little girl?" Sarah clutched her bag tighter, stepping back. I don't have anything," she stammered. "Don't lie." The man barked, stepping closer. Shadow let out a low, warning growl, his fur bristling as he positioned himself between Sarah and the men. "Shut that damn dog up," the tall man sneered. "Or I'll make sure it never barks again." Sarah trembled. "Please just let us go," but mercy did not exist in places like this. The man lunged, his hand grabbing for her bag. In that instant, Shadow exploded into action. A savage snarl ripped through the air, and he launched himself at the attacker, sinking his sharp teeth into the man's arm. A scream of pain echoed through the alley, blood splattering onto the pavement. The man flailed, punching and kicking wildly, but Shadow refused to let go. One of the other thugs lifted a foot, aiming a brutal kick at Shadow's ribs. "No!" Sarah screamed, but the impact landed, sending Shadow crashing to the ground with a pained yelp. Sarah fell to her knees beside him, sobs choking her. But Shadow didn't give up. He struggled to his feet, baring his teeth, fire burning in his eyes as he faced their enemies. "Shit, let's get out of here," the injured man howled, clutching his bleeding arm. The three men bolted, their footsteps vanishing into the night, leaving behind only the sound of Sarah's ragged breaths and Shadow's soft whimpers. She wrapped her arms around Shadow, her hands trembling as she stroked his fur. "Are you okay, Shadow? Please don't leave me." Shadow licked her hand, weak but determined, as if to tell her he wasn't going anywhere. In the darkness of the alley they had only each other, a girl and a dog fighting to survive. But Sarah didn't know that at that very moment, a pair of mysterious eyes watched them from afar. And fate was about to knock on their door once more. The dark alley was now drowned in a heavy silence, broken only by the howling wind scraping against stained brick walls and Sarah's ragged breathing. She knelt on the freezing concrete, her trembling arms wrapped tightly around Shadow. The dog lay motionless in her embrace, his shallow breaths forming faint clouds in the icy air. His body shivered from the pain inflicted by the brutal kick of the thugs. Sarah gently stroked his blood-matted fur, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. "Shadow, you have to hold on, okay?" she whispered, her voice breaking with desperation. "You're all I have." Shadow weakly licked her hand, a faint yet affectionate gesture, as if trying to comfort her amid the cruel storm of fate. The snowfall thickened, cold and indifferent, settling over the two survivors in the heart of an unfeeling city. Sarah lifted her tear-filled eyes to the void above, her heart heavy with despair. She had no money, no support, no way to take Shadow to a vet. The world had never cared about her, and now, it seemed equally indifferent to a wounded dog. But then, through the curtain of snow, a figure emerged, a sliver of light piercing the darkness. "Are you all right?" A gentle yet commanding voice broke through the cold. Sarah looked up, startled. Standing before her was an elderly woman, draped in an elegant gray coat, her sharp yet warm eyes gazing down at Sarah and Shadow. It was the same woman Sarah had noticed a few days ago, the one who had silently observed her singing by the subway station. Who are you?" Sarah croaked, clutching Shadow tighter as if afraid he would be taken away. The woman knelt down, her expensive coat touching the filthy ground without hesitation. "I've been looking for you," she said softly, her gaze shifting to Shadow, studying him as if seeing a ghost from the past. "Your dog, what's his name?" Sarah stiffened, her instincts guarded. "Shadow. He's mine." The woman offered a small, bittersweet smile. "Shadow. A fitting name." With measured calm, she began to share her story. Her name was Margaret Caldwell, once a renowned dog trainer who had worked with police and rescue dogs. Years ago she had owned a German Shepherd, a champion, her pride and joy. But he had been stolen. She searched everywhere but he was never found. "Your Shadow," Margaret murmured, her voice trembling. "He looks just like him. The stance, the eyes, even the small scar on his left ear." Sarah tensed, pulling Shadow closer. "He's mine. You can't take him." Margaret shook her head, her eyes filled with sincerity. "I have no intention of taking him. I saw how you cared for him, how he protected you. You two belong together. I just want to help." Sarah stared in disbelief. "Help? Why?" Margaret held her gaze. "Because I see in you what I once saw in myself. Resilience, loyalty, and a heart that refuses to give up no matter how cruel the world is. I believe in fate, and fate brought me here." She reached into her coat and handed Sarah a business card. "I have a warm home, a training center, and a life where you both can belong. Come with me, Sarah." Sarah hesitated, gripping the card tightly. She had lived too long in a world where every promise came with a price. But when she looked into Shadow's trusting eyes, she knew she couldn't turn away from this chance. "All right," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Days later, Sarah's life transformed completely. Margaret's home wasn't just a shelter, it was a grand estate on the outskirts of New York, surrounded by sprawling fields and a state-of-the-art dog training center. Shadow was taken to a vet immediately, his wounds healing quickly under expert care. His coat grew sleek, his body strong, and his eyes gleamed with new vitality. Yet, despite his training, Shadow never strayed from Sarah's side. Margaret kept her word. She gave Sarah a warm room, fresh clothes, and most importantly, a chance to start anew. Sarah returned to school, something she never imagined possible after years on the streets. By day she worked alongside Margaret at the center, learning how to train and care for dogs, understanding their behavior and even mastering medical care. She flourished, like a flower finally blooming after a relentless winter. One evening, as snow fell outside the Grand Estate's windows, Sarah sat on a plush sofa, Shadow curled beside her, his head resting on her lap. She gazed at the distant city skyline, the place that had once been her personal hell, where she had once believed she would die alone. Stroking Shadow's fur, she whispered, "We made it, buddy." Shadow let out a content sigh as if in agreement. All of it had started with a single act of kindness, the decision to sacrifice her only blanket to save a stray dog. And in return she had found not only a loyal friend but also a family, a purpose, and a future she had never dared to dream of. Shadow wasn't just her dog, he was her hero, the light that had guided her out of the darkness. Life can be cruel enough to break our faith, but even in the darkest moments, small acts of kindness can open doors to extraordinary change. Never stop believing in the power of compassion. It has the strength to change not just your fate but the fate of those around you. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring and heartfelt stories about humanity and the deep bond between people and animals. Let's spread kindness together.